How's it going, guys? I'm da-oista, and today we're back with another episode of Minecraft, but we're going to be doing something a little bit different here today. We're going to be checking out a build I did called the Lighthouse. And what is this? Well, it's basically just a warehouse in our creative world here that shows off all of the, or a lot of the lighting mechanics in the game, and we're just going to go through here and explore it, and hopefully we can learn a little bit about how light works in the game. So first of all, before we get started, I think we should go through the debug menu here and see what it has to offer in the ways of information on light. So first of all, we've got our client light and our server light, which you can see on the left side towards the middle of the debug screen there. And we'll just go through what the numbers associated with those mean. So the first number on the client light, or the far left one rather, is the total light level at the player's feet. That would be this block down here. Then the second number is the amount of light from the sky at the player's feet, and we'll get to what that is a little bit later, as there is a difference between sky block and block light. Third number is what I mentioned just a moment ago, the block lights. That's going to be things like glowstone, torches, lava, etc. Then if we go to server light, the numbers below client light, those are pretty much the same thing, except for the first number doesn't exist. However, the other two are the same values. Now that we know what the debug menu has to offer, we know how to interpret it as we go through this area here. First of all, I just set up a physical representation of how light works to help us get an idea of how it interacts with the world. So I took all of the main light sources that you would build with, the more practical options, and lined them up and separated them off to see their effects individually. First of all, we've got the block name and then the light level they have. So fire's got a light level of 15, lava has a light level of 15, torches have a light level of 14, redstone torches have a light level of 7, soul torches have a light level of 10, campfires have a light level of 15, and the soul variation of the campfire has a light level of only 10. Lanterns have a light level of 15, and again, the soul variation of the lantern has a light level of 10. End rods have the same light level as torches, coming in at 14. Jack-o'-lanterns have a light level of 15. Shroom lights, again, light level of 15. Magma blocks only have a light level of 3. Glowstone has a light level of 15, as well as redstone lamps. And last but not least, we have sea lanterns, which again have a light level of 15. So just as another way of visualizing sort of the way that the lights are spread out, I guess, as far as their values go, I put a button under each light that has a light level of 15. So as you can see, a good portion of the lights are the maximum light level. An example of that is fire. So let's just go down here and I'll sort of explain what these pressure plates are that are on each of these rows. We look at our far right number on client light, we have a light level of 14, which if you were to step in the fire, you would have a light level of 15, which is fire's light level. So 14 is 1 block away, 13 is 2 blocks away, 12 is 3 blocks away, and so on and so forth. And that decreases every block you move away from the light source until you reach 0. Now this pressure plate is at 0, meaning that this block is no longer affected by that light source. However, if you move one closer, we can see it has a light level of 1. And these pressure plates are really just here to sort of help visualize how the light interacts with the world at different values. I guess I can get rid of that. So yeah, hopefully this little layout here helps those who are visual learners sort of take in this information a little bit easier. But there's a lot more to cover here, so let's move on. So in a few of these areas, there's going to be information that I pulled from the wiki, and I'm going to be linking all of those pages down below so that you can go read on all of this yourself and get the more detailed version of this. There's also some things that I won't cover just on account of their complexity, and I'll talk a little bit about that once I get to those areas. And those will also be linked in the wikis that I included down below. So this area here has got some odds and ends things, and we'll just break it down section by section. First of all, we've got the uh, fire and soul variation, or sorry, we've got regular lights and then the soul variation of each of those lights. And I thought that it was just interesting to note that the light level of the campfire and the soul variation of the campfire is 15 and 10. Whereas the lanterns also have a light level of 15 and 10. But the torches is what interested me because they break this rule. The regular torch only has a light level of 14 as opposed to 15. But the soul torch maintains a light level of 10, like the other soul variations of these lights. Not super important, but maybe interesting to know going forward. I thought it was pretty interesting and worth sharing at least. Next up, we've got lava. Lava is the only light-producing fluid in vanilla Minecraft, and it also has another interesting little characteristic of it, or mechanic rather. It actually blocks light, just like any solid block would block light. So what I mean by that is, if there's a torch here, the torch's light isn't going to pass through it. This is a little bit difficult to see in-game because lava produces its own light and oftentimes drowns out this effect. Next up, we'll come over here to this section. This section is just all the light levels of the blocks in the game. I just thought this was just interesting information to sort of lay out and visualize. They start out at a light level of 1 and go to a light level of 15, which is the maximum light level. Next up, we've got an area dedicated to the more obscure lighting sources in the game, and these are blocks that produce light, but maybe aren't the most practical to build with. First off, we have the end portal block, which actually produces a light level of 15, and I should clarify that it is not the portal frame blocks, but the actual portal blocks themselves that produce this light level. Next up, we've got a beacon, which again is probably a little bit more expensive than what's practical in the game to build with, but it does produce light and it has a light level of 15. So if we move over here, we can see the furnace actually is capable of producing a light level. For those who don't know, when lit, the furnace does produce its own light. Next up, we've got the nether portal, and the nether portal does produce light also at a light level of 11. And again, I should clarify, it's not the obsidian around it, but the actual portal blocks themselves. And if we look up above here, I sort of ran out of room, so I had to smack it on the wall. We've got a crying obsidian, and crying obsidian has a light level of 10. Down here, we've got redstone ore, which actually does have a light level when it's interacted with. So you can see these particle effects coming off the blocks, and that means that they've been interacted with recently, and after so long, this will stop and they will no longer produce light. You've probably noticed this if you've ever gone mining and accidentally tapped on one of these with the right click. Next up, we've got the redstone repeater, which has a light level of 9, just like the redstone ore. However, it only is the case when it's activated. When it is in the off position, it no longer produces light. To the right here, we've got the ender chest, which has a light level of 7. Then over here, we've got the redstone torch, which I did cover in that room over there as having a light level of 7. However, in the off state, it is interesting to note that it does not have a light level and can be turned off. I thought that was pretty interesting and maybe an interesting or handy mechanic when working on a build. So over here we have the thing that probably interested me the most when I was looking up the information for this video, is the brown mushroom does produce light. It comes in with a whopping light level of 1. And I did not know that previous to reading up on how light works in the game. So I thought it was pretty interesting. And we'll definitely be revisiting this towards the end of the video. But for now, let's move on to the next item here. Next, we've got the brewing stand, which has a light level of 1, just like the mushroom. Then over here, for those who don't know, the dragon egg actually also produces light, again at a light level of 1. Now, Just to explain why I have a weird little item here to represent it is because the dragon egg is actually not placeable in creative mode. It cannot be searched up in the menu here, so I had to get a little bit creative on how I represented that. But in the regular game, in survival, when you place it down, it does have a light level of 1. Next up, we've got the end portal frame, that has a light level of 1, which is these over here, just not the portal blocks themselves, but the frame. Next, we've got the respawn anchor, a new block in the game, which does also have a light level when it is lit up. It has a light level of 15 to offer. Next up, we've got the sea pickle, which when all 4 of them are placed in a block at once, they do have a light level of 15. We'll visit this a little bit more later on, but with only 1 sea pickle, the light level is level 6, and 2, it gradually increases, 3 increases again, and like I said, 4 is a light level of 15. Next up, we have an area beautifully illustrated by myself with an original art piece I like to call Sunny Day. And what this area is it's dedicated to the Skylight values, and we'll be talking a little bit more of that a little later on. But first of all, the Skylight during a sunny day, or not nighttime rather, is a light level of 15. When it's raining or snowing, the light level is 12, and when it is thundering, the light level is 10. However, at night, which is where we are right now, the light level is 4. Next up, we've got an area dedicated to transparent blocks. So what is a transparent block? A transparent block is a block like snow slabs, slime blocks, signs, slabs, or an anvil. And what this is transparent blocks are blocks that allow light through them, unlike solid blocks. So if we take a look at our F3, we can see the far right number on our client light, our block light, is at 12 where we're standing, 14 when we're on the torch. And if we place a solid block in between us, we can see that that light gets interrupted and drops down to 10 as opposed to being 12. This is the case with any solid block. However, if we take a block that is not a solid block, like an anvil, that value doesn't change because the light passes through it. Slabs also have this effect, as well as signs, snow slabs, and slime blocks. Now, snow slabs, it should be noted that they have this effect no matter how many slabs there are until it reaches a full block. And then it does drop down 1. So when the slabs are stacked to a full block size, then it becomes a solid block. Next up, we'll just move over here and we'll talk about diffusing blocks. Now, diffusing blocks are blocks that diffuse skylight. So our skylight value, which is the second to the right there, is 15 right now. And if this were to be above us, that light level would drop. But this area is dedicated to showing that that does not occur with block light. So as we can see here, when we are 1, 2, 3 blocks away from this torch, we have a light level of 11. And when we stand over here, again, 3 blocks away from the torch, it's still 11. So we can conclude that the water source did not affect the light level given off by the torch. Next up, we have an area over here dedicated to sort of discussing what skylight is. So we'll get into what this area over here was talking about, as well as what a diffusing block is. So for those who don't know, the sky has a light level that is separate from light that comes from blocks. And the way it works is a bit interesting and a little bit complicated, but once you understand it, it's pretty simple. So each block that is uninterrupted above you has a skylight value, and that's 15 most of the time when it's daytime. However, it changes depending on the this time of day or the weather. So right now it's raining. That means our light level is actually 15. So Each air block is a light level of, we'll use daytime as an example here, a light level of 15. And that is the case all the way down until it hits a diffusing block, such as ice, water, leaves, cobwebs, and there are many more, which again, you can find in the wikis I will link. But once they hit a diffusing block, it stops the skylight, so the blocks underneath no longer have the skylight effect. But the block above has a bleeding effect, or fading effect rather, in that this is the last block that produces light. So the block below it is going to be a light level of 14, and the block below that 13, so on and so forth. Next we have the same bit of information here, except for it's a little bit different if you're a Bedrock player, and this is Java edition, so this is not the case for the game that I'm playing in now, but I just thought I would discuss it because I thought it was an interesting difference in the two versions of Minecraft. So Skylight works a little bit different in Bedrock edition in that it has the light level of sky blocks that are 15 during the day when it's not raining, as long as the block is not interrupted, same as Java edition. But once it hits a diffusing block, there is a additional modifier of -1. So this would be our last sky block, but this block down here wouldn't go from 15 to 14. It would go from 15 to 13 because of that -1 modifier. The block below that would then continue down normally, going from 13 to 12. Next up, we've got a tiny little smashed area here because I was getting a little short on room, dedicated to grass. And what I wanted to put in here is that grass blocks do need sunlight, otherwise they will die and the grass will no longer spread. So if there are too many blocks above the grass, the grass will die. This is also the case for transparent blocks. If there are too many transparent blocks above grass, again, the same thing will happen. It will die and not spread. That's it for this area. We're going to move on to a little area here called block of text. And what this is a room dedicated to, well, a lot of writing on the wall. First of all, we've got the end and the nether. Both of these dimensions do not have a skylight effect, so take that into account when building in these areas. Next up, we've got smooth lighting to discuss. Now, what smooth lighting is, if you've never heard of it, is it's a lighting engine that's in the game. All it does is it bends light and shadows across the surfaces of blocks and darkens corners. This has no effect on the game or the game's mechanics. It's simply something that happens to improve the aesthetic of the game and how light looks in the game. Next up, we've got internal light level. And I'll just read a little bit here from the wiki. Again, you'll be able to use the links to read a little bit more of this yourself. But basically, internal light level is used for in-game calculations, uses an internal light level of blocks to compute aspects of the game, such as mob spawning, daylight detector outputs, and plant growth. The game uses skylight, time, and weather to calculate an internal skylight value, then uses maximum level of block light and the internal skylight to calculate internal light. This value is an integer with a maximum level of 15, and it also can be negative. So what this is basically it's the explanation as to how this works over here. And what this is for plant growth or mob spawning or daylight detectors, it uses this internal light level value, right? This is what it used to determine if these things meet the criteria to take place or not. So an example of that is with plant growth, and plant growth is determined by light levels. So when the game is checking to see if a plant is able to grow, it checks the block above it, see if its light level is high enough. And if the light level is high enough, it meets the criteria and the plant will be allowed to grow, or move up in its growth stages, rather. Plant uprooting is different in that the game actually checks the block that the plant occupies, and if the light level isn't high enough, the plant will uproot. And that is usually demonstrated through the seed popping up out of the ground. We'll move back over here and we'll just take a look at ice. Ice is affected by light in that if a bright enough light source is close enough to it, or the light level is high enough rather, the ice will melt. However, this is not the case with daylight. The skylight will not affect ice no matter what level it's at. Over here we've got rendered brightness, and this is where I sort of throw in the towel with this and admit defeat, because this stuff is pretty complicated and most of it is not necessarily very relevant or useful for actually playing the game as far as I can tell. So I'm going to leave this up to you guys. Again, the wiki will be able to explain this to you if you are interested enough in checking that out. When I checked it out, it was pretty much a bunch of numbers and spreadsheets, which makes me think that it is more so how the game operates as far as behind the scenes stuff goes, and not so much useful information for playing. Next up, we'll just leave this area behind and we'll check out this area right here with the mushroom in it, because I'll be honest, I really didn't think mushrooms produce light and that the wiki was lying to me. But I went in here and I checked it out, and we can see that far right number again on client light, which shows our block light. It does go to 1 when you are standing on a mushroom, which means that mushrooms do in fact produce their own light. I just thought that was really interesting, and I wanted to double check that. That's pretty much it. There's one thing I'd like to demonstrate over here, and it is the sea pickle light. It's kind of space consuming, so I didn't include it in here. So if we just check this out during nighttime, we can see that there is a difference in the light level produced by the sea pickles depending on how many of them are placed within the block. So we've got over here 1 sea pickle, 2, 3, and then the maximum of 4 sea pickles placed in a block of water. And we can see that depending on how many there are, the light level does change, and it gradually increases along with the amount of pickles present in the block. This over here being the maximum with 4 and a light level of 15. This over here being the minimum with 1 sea pickle and a light level of 6. That's pretty much it for this video. Hopefully this was able to share some information with you guys that would be useful when building or working on projects in the game. And if you guys enjoyed, feel free to like and comment. And if you want to follow along on future adventures with us, feel free to subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye-bye.